Hello, hope you're doing well. I wanted to film a quick video. Hopefully it's quick. I'll get on here and say I'm going to film a quick video and then it'll end up being like 30 minutes long, so we'll see. But this is a message for someone who is having trouble letting go of a perception of someone else and assuming responsibility for that person's actions. And this is a message that is something I'm also having to work through in my life. And I was just making breakfast not too long ago, and while I was cooking, I had a lecture playing on the TV from Carolyn Mace. She's like a spiritual coach and like an author. She has a book. So she has several books, but one of the books of hers that I have is called Anatomy of the Spirit. And I've had this book for years. I was just looking for it because I wanted to show it. I can't find it, but I do know that I have it. And I don't think I've ever read it, or maybe I started it years ago and didn't finish it. But for whatever reason, this video popped up on my algorithm today and I started listening to it. And so it must have been like a recording of her doing like a workshop or something. And she was going over different archetypes, and perfectionism came up, which is something that honestly I need to do. That's like a whole video on its own. I need to do a whole series on perfectionism and how I'm like having to actively release perfectionism in my life. But she started talking about perfectionism from the perspective of an individual wanting other people to show up as how they think they should show up in their lives. And this idea of allowing a person to simply exist as they are, and you having to be the person to assume responsibility for just yourself and show up as you are, and know if that person is not showing up in the way that's healthy for you, you have one of two options: to either accept them as they are or to remove yourself from them. I'm paraphrasing and just kind of like inserting some of my own ideas in there, but that was like the general idea of this clip of a video, or this clipped video that I watched. And she gave an example of like an addict, and like, addicts are struggling with addiction. And when an addict does something, you can take it personally, and it could be about your own individual ego, or you can accept the fact that that person is an addict and their addiction causes them to do certain things that they may not be aware of if they were in a more stable mindset, I guess. It's the best way to put that. Or if they were void of addiction, they operate differently than from their addicted mind. And so it got me thinking about something in my personal life that I actually have been, I don't want to say struggling with, because me saying struggle kind of feels like I'm assuming a victim mentality. And for this particular instance, it is pretty simple for me to just accept the person that I've been having this issue with as they are, and to release the responsibility of me having to experience them in another way, in a way that's more gentle and more aligned with what I wish our relationship looked like instead of what it actually is. And so last week when I had therapy, I was talking to my therapist about this person that I'm really close to in my life, who's done, I've known this person for my whole life. And we have had some moments in recent years where it has been brought to my attention that they don't actually see me as the person that I am. And I've taken that personally. I have taken that personally from a space of like hurt and a place of suffering. And so as a result, when I'm around this person for extended periods of times, and this is somebody that I want to remain close to, I want this person to be in my life, But I've noticed, as part of the work that I have done through my healing journey and just like working alongside my therapist in prioritizing my healing, is that I'm self-aware enough to know when, if I'm around people, certain people for extended periods, my nervous system has a visceral reaction. And so this is one of those people who I have found that although I love this person, I enjoy spending time with them, my nervous system is also in a state of trying to recalibrate what it's and what my experience is with them, because for so long, for many years, I have experienced them in a way that wasn't the most beneficial to me from my perspective. And, you know, I think personally, and I'm saying this for my ego self, like caused me some pain and, you know, maybe there was some neglect or just there wasn't a conscious awareness, is what I'm learning, of how that person was showing up in my life. And I have just recently been able to grapple with these emotions that I've been experiencing when I'm in their presence for long periods. I noticed that when I'm in this person's presence for long periods, my nervous system is hypervigilant, and I move from a space of like peace and calm to like this hypervigilance of like wondering if I'm going to experience the same things that I have experienced with them for literal decades. And so I was talking to my therapist about this, and she said to me, you know, I don't actually think that this person is harmful. And she wasn't, I don't think she was saying that. And it struggled. I struggled with hearing what she was saying initially. And it took me a couple of days to digest that, because I wasn't happy with that after I left our session. But as I look back on her words a few days later, I understand what she was saying. And when I heard Carolyn Mace say what she was saying on this video earlier, it immediately made me think back to this experience that I shared with my therapist. And the reason I say that is because the person that I'm talking about, or the person that I was speaking to my therapist about, there's some other things going on that I can see that this person struggles with, and that I think that the person hasn't been able to name, or at least if they have been able to name it, they haven't shared it with me. But it seems like this person has not accepted that they are struggling with a particular thing. Let's call it like I don't even want to call it a mental health condition, but they're dealing with something. And what I have learned is that I am only responsible for my own emotions. I cannot control anyone else's emotions. I can't control how anybody else shows up in the world. And as much as I love this person, and as much as I have tried to encourage them to get on from what, from my perspective would be a stable path, they're still in this space of stuckness, right? And I'm intentionally being vague here, because there is something very specific that I see that they are struggling with, but they don't see it. And it is not anything that's so detrimental where like an intervention needs to take place. Like one might, set up an intervention for someone who's dealing with a particular addiction. But I've talked to my therapist about this circumstance that this person is, from my perspective, been dealing with their entire life, or not even dealing with it, because I truly don't even think they're aware of it. But as I've gotten older, I've become more aware of it. And my therapist said, this is the thing that kind of bothered me when I heard it the first time. She said, this person doesn't even see that they're in the midst of this chaos. They're okay with it because that is basically normalized behavior for them. They don't see that as a problem. In the way that you and I see that that's a problem, they don't see it. And no change will be made until they are able to see it clearly. And she said, because we know that about that person, that's what also makes me think that what they did to you wasn't intentional. I understand, this is like me paraphrasing what the therapist said to me. She said, I understand that you have experienced hurt as a result of it, but it is now your responsibility to know that this person isn't maliciously trying to harm you in doing the things that they've done. A part of them doesn't see you, which was also really hard to hear, because like this is somebody that I really care about and I want them to see me as a full person, but I also have to accept that they don't even see themselves as they should. They don't see themselves worthy of certain things, and that I can see, and it concerns me at times. But again, like, I can only control myself. I can't control the actions of other people. And so when my therapist told me that, it was unsettling because I kind of felt like, how could they not see that they hurt me? How could they not care? And she's like, I truly don't think that they even understand, because there are certain things about themselves that they're not seeing. So it's hard for them to see how you're experiencing them when they don't even see how other people are experiencing them. I don't know. Maybe that makes sense. Maybe it doesn't. But like I said, it was a hard pill for me to swallow, because initially when I heard that, I took that as my therapist telling me that the hurt that I experienced was irrelevant, that it didn't matter. And I now can see that that's not what she was saying, but I was coming to that conversation from a wounded space, and honestly a victimized space. And so now I am old enough and wise enough to know that this person is dealing with something that has been undiagnosed, that has not been addressed for many years, and it's showing up in other aspects, other areas of their life. One of which is like my relationship with them and how they've shown up in our relationship. And when I think about it from that vantage point of like that person navigating their own inner world and their own, I want to say inner demons, but again, like, I'm not even sure that that person is aware of what I'm experiencing with them. And I don't want to say, I wanted to say inner demons, but I also don't know that that's what their internal state is. So I don't really know. Like, I only know what I experience. But my therapist's recommendation was to give myself some distance from this person. And this is a person that I've had a relationship with for a very long time, and I don't want to completely cut them off, but I know that I have to heal a part of myself that was wounded by them. And in order for me to do that, in order for my nervous system to become okay with being in their presence in any capacity, I do have to set a boundary there. And I may need to put myself in a position where I am experiencing them less often, so that I give myself the space to like repair the hurt that this person caused. So that's one truth. The other truth is that even though I experienced this, I don't believe that it came from a malicious place. I think it came from a place of that person operating the way that they thought they were supposed to operate for various reasons. I'm not going to try to unpack another person's emotions or whatever, or just ways of being, because I don't know the full story there. I don't know what that person experienced. So I can't try to unpack that for them. I can only speak from my perspective. Hopefully that's not confusing. I know I'm like being very vague, but it kind of goes back to this larger point of reaching a point in the healing journey where you have to decide if you are going to exercise a level of grace with someone and accept them for who they are, regardless of what took place. And like, obviously you have to have your own discernment. If the person that's watching this video, if whoever this message is for, if you've dealt with some abuse or something like that, that was very extreme, then like maybe that is your boundary right there. Like maybe you don't want to engage with someone, but you have to know the situation based on your own experience. Like, I'm not telling anybody to stay in a dynamic that's abusive or anything like that, because I don't think that's healthy. But I know many of us have dealt with familial relationships or even friendships where sometimes things seem very one-sided. Or even if that person is showing up for you and you know that they're doing their best isn't always what you needed in that time, and their best could have still caused harm. And that's one thing that, like, as I've gotten really deep in this healing journey, I have to constantly come back to that point, because the wounded, child inside of me wants to be seen, and she wants to remind me constantly of all of the hurt that I've experienced throughout her existence within me. And I want to honor her, but I also, like, as her caring adult right now, have to be able to help her heal through that. Help myself heal those wounded parts that still exist at a big age now. And that sometimes means being able to forgive people who don't have the capacity to assume responsibility for the hurt and the pain that they caused. Again, like, you can experience hurt with someone without them being abusive. I'm not talking about anything extreme here. Like, use your discernment when you receive this message, and when you try to apply, if you do, when you apply to your own lived experience, like, please use your own discernment about who should remain or who should completely be, removed from your life. I can't tell you how to operate, but I'm truly just speaking from my experience of, like, coming to terms with the fact that some of the caring adults in our lives, when I was growing up, were operating from the best place that they knew. And again, like, that best place may have not been the best for me or whoever was on the receiving end of it. And some people, you can have that conversation with them and say, like, here is how I experienced you. And they may be able to, like, receive it and sincerely apologize or offer some sort of, like, apology or explanation for why they showed up the way that they did. And then there are some people who won't be able to hear it at all, because they may not see it as an issue, or they may think, like, oh, well, I did the best that I could do, and that wasn't good enough, And so, and I'm not saying that, like, the latter was my experience with this person, but it is just really on me right now to have to navigate a relationship that I don't want to lose, and simultaneously set an appropriate boundary so that I can start to heal the hurt parts of me, and to understand that I cannot control another person's actions. I can only show grace and know that that person, based on what I know now, because now I've collected a lot more data over the years, that person was showing up the best that they could. And I think the reason why the Carolyn Myss, the talk resonated so much, it was because she said something. She was talking about addiction, and she said something like, I think she was sharing a story about her brother that was an addict, and she said, if I continue to get upset with my brother, and I think her brother is deceased, if I continue to get upset with my brother, then like I'm just gonna exhaust and overwhelm myself. Like I'm gonna be the person that continues to be upset at the end of the day because I'm holding resentment for this person who didn't have the capacity as an addict to do better. And again, I say that, I'm paraphrasing. I'm not saying that as a way to like make excuses for people. But with addiction, I mean, if you've ever dealt with addiction or experienced someone who is an addict, then you understand that it truly controls them. And it doesn't matter how good of a person you are, you cannot take that personally. You can, if you choose to take it personally, you will continue to be hurt because that addict is not in control. That person that addiction has latched onto isn't in control. And when I start to think about it like that, like, wow, this is not necessarily addiction that I'm talking about in my personal relationship that I've been using as an example, but it is kind of a form of addiction. When I look at it a little bit deeper, it is attached to that person in the same way that, an addict might be attached to whatever their vice is. And I have to say to myself, like, this person is not in control of this aspect of themselves or their lives. And if I want a relationship, I have to let that part go. I have to let that hurt part go, where it's like, or heal it, because it's always going to be there. But I have to respect myself enough to have a healthy boundary and just allow them to exist the way that they exist and know that it's not personal. Not take it personally when someone is doing something to me, like to try to change that narrative that they're doing this thing to me, and understand that they are operating from this circumstance, and from that circumstance they actually might be doing the best that they can. And I can see it differently now, and I can again decide if I want to show grace and keep a healthy boundary with that person so that I can maintain some level of a relationship, or if I want to completely like exile them from my life. And I don't want to do the latter. I want to have a relationship with this person. So that means that I will have to stop taking things personally and understand that I am also dealing with a wounded individual who can't fully see and appreciate the hurt that I've experienced as a result of their actions. And that is really hard, but it is also one of those things that now at this stage in my healing, I'm coming to terms with this. It's early in this part of my healing for me to start to like be able to say that out loud. I think if this were something that I was finally realizing 4 or 5 years ago, it would be a lot harder for me to like digest that. But where I am right now, I can keep a safe distance so that I can maintain this person in my life. And the way that I do that and respect myself and protect myself is to, like I said, set certain boundaries so that I can still enjoy this person and like enjoy time with them, but also allow myself to heal from some of the past wounds. And yeah, the healing stuff is really a journey. And I like, even this message was kind of hard for me to get out and hard for me to like really articulate in a very clear, concise way because it's so complicated. And when we start thinking about relationships with people that we've had for years, and entering new stages in life where you have a different perspective of like how someone might have shown up in your life when you were young versus like how they show up now, and being able to see that person from a different perspective. For me, it has caused me to like move. I feel myself getting emotional. It has caused me to move with a lot more grace for people, and knowing that I do not want to harbor resentment for the rest of my life. And I'm also at this stage where I realize how much I have just pushed down and pushed down and pushed down, and having to allow myself the space and the freedom to like release all of those grudges and all of those deep-seated wounds and resentment that I have held for so long, because I was taking all of these things personally, and I could not rationalize the idea of someone being able to hurt me again, not in necessarily an abusive way, but still causing some hurt, and also seeing them as being a human that was capable of making their own mistakes and not even being consciously aware of the hurt that they were causing. So yeah, that's where I am in my, in this particular area of my healing journey. It's so interesting because as I was talking to my therapist, and I've kind of like, there's so many things that I've had on my therapy checklist that I have been able to honestly check off and say like, yeah, I feel really good about the fact that I've addressed this wound and this wound and this wound and this issue and this thing with myself or with XYZ person. And how as you start to heal those things, new stuff comes up. And she told me like, the therapy process might not last forever, but like as long as you are living and breathing in your body, you will always be reaching a state of like healing. You will always be healing because new things will come up, and you can choose to address them as soon as they come up, or you can choose to just let it live in your body. And I am choosing not to let that stuff just linger in my body. And I understand that some of these, like some of this purging that's happening for me is really, really painful and is deeply uncomfortable at times. But I know that the sense of freedom that I'm seeking in my life is a material freedom, like a freedom of time, a freedom of energy, a financial freedom, but it's also a freedom of resentment, freedom of pain, freedom of, hard feelings that I've harbored, and grief. I want to rid myself of all of those negative emotions that I have just allowed to be bottled up. And it doesn't happen overnight, because a lot of this stuff, I'm not even aware of it. And it is not until I heal one thing and I'm able to put that on the shelf and like it doesn't bother me anymore that something else comes up. And then I then have to go through the process again of like sorting all that gunk out, letting the gunk come out, sorting through it, and then figuring out what to do with it, how to deal with it, how to eliminate it. And if it's not something that I can totally eliminate, then maybe it is the practice of setting healthy boundaries so that I can still have access to it, but not in the same way that it had access to me before, where it is consuming all of my energy. So yeah, I know this was kind of like a jumbled message, but a lot came up for me when I was listening to that talk. And I just finished The Last of Us yesterday. And I think I talked about that in another video. And I got to an episode where, what's the main character's name? Joel. There was this scene where Joel's brother got in trouble. They were kids. It was like a flashback memory. Tommy got in trouble and he was afraid because he thought the dad was going to beat him. Apparently the father was like abusive or something. And he was also a police officer. So the older brother tells the younger brother, like, don't worry, I'll protect you. The dad comes home. He has a conversation with Joel, who's the older brother. And he's like, he tries to take up for the brother. The brother got in trouble and the dad was made aware of it because I think police were involved. and they got off the hook because their dad was a cop. And so the brother, Joel, the older brother, he says, like, don't hurt him. Like, don't hurt me, don't hurt him. And the dad gets emotional and he's like, you know, I never did. I know that I beat y'all or I do whatever to y'all, but I never did to y'all what my father did to me. He was so horrible. And I show you tough love, and like maybe I take it too far sometime, but I would never treat y'all the way he treated me. And it's this idea of like generational wounds and like generational curses. The process of breaking those isn't always like you just sever the tie and like you go from one generation of somebody who is physically abusive, a parent that's physically abusive, to the next generation being one that is like not abusive at all. Like that can happen. If that happens, that's a beautiful thing. But sometimes the reality is sometimes it is like very severely abusive to a little bit abusive to not abusive at all, like physically. Not that, you know, that process is right or wrong, but it just kind of made me think about the fact that as the generation progresses, there may be a tendency to want to do better. And this kind of goes back to my earlier point of like doing better might not always be what the best thing was for you in that period. Yeah. Again, use your discernment. Like if any of this speaks to you, I know again it was kind of like all over the place, but use your discernment. Like this isn't necessarily, this really for me at least was not a message about like physical harm or physical abuse or anything. It is really about being able to show grace to people who may have harmed us, even psychologically, or caused some wounds, and them not knowing the impact of their actions and not doing those things from a malicious place, because the reality is like any of us are capable of doing that. We might say something or do something and someone on the receiving end might be hurt from that action and we don't even know it. You know, like that's just human nature. And it takes real courage to be able to tell someone that you were wounded by whatever the action was. And if that person is in a space of receiving that, that's great. And even if they receive it and then continue to hurt you, there has to be a level, I think, there needs to be a level of detachment from like, okay, this person isn't getting it. So if I want to continue to be wounded in this way, I have to, if I don't want to continue to be wounded in this way, then maybe I need to set some boundaries, especially if it's not like, you know, I'm not talking about anything abusive physically. I can't stress that enough. So yeah, that's all I got. This was all over the place, but it just felt, I kind of feel like a lump in my throat as I'm sharing this, because this is like really not hard. This is really hard work, and it's really not easy to talk about some of the things, especially like trying to be vague and, you know, not air all of the dirty laundry, but still acknowledging that dirty laundry is there, you know, and not everybody chooses to go to the laundromat when they need to. So yeah, thank you for watching. If you made it to the end of this video, I hope that this message found whoever it was for and that you took what you needed from it, and I'll see you in the next one.